The chamber walls seemed to press in on Fengju, the silence a heavy, suffocating blanket. He was trapped, a rat in a cage. But he wasn't just any rat. He had power now, a power he barely understood. The law. He had to try something. Closing his eyes, he drew upon the roiling sea of void energy within him. It was a chaotic, untamed force, and for a moment, he feared it would consume him whole. He focused, visualizing a point just outside his confinement, a point of freedom. He pushed the energy, forcing it to obey, to bend reality to his will. The world twisted. There was a sickening lurch, a feeling like being turned inside out. Then, his feet found solid ground again, but his knees buckled instantly, and he crashed onto the cold stone floor, gasping for breath. He looked up. He'd moved. He'd actually teleported. But he was only 3 feet from where he started. A wave of exhaustion washed over him, so profound it felt like his very soul was being drained. He checked his internal reserves. More than half his void energy was gone. Gone. For a 3-foot hop, a bitter laugh escaped his lips. So this was the price of his new power. It wasn't a limitless wellspring. It was a cruel economy of brutal costs and agonizing cooldowns. He had the potential to shatter mountains, but right now, he could barely stumble across a room. The sheer inwards, sharp and focused. Fengju, look up. He followed her gaze. Above them, the ceiling wasn't a solid sheet of stone. A section looked different, a patchwork of weaker, more brittle rock and mortar. A structural flaw. An opportunity. He slowly got to his feet, a new idea forming. If brute force was too expensive, maybe finesse was the key. He reached out, his fingers tingling with a different kind of energy, the destructive, yet precise, power of entropic touch. He wasn't trying to blast his way out. He was going to unmake his prison. One piece at a time. The power flowed into his fingertips, a subtle, dark current. He carefully placed his hand against the weakened section of the ceiling. There was no explosion, no grand display of force. Instead, where his fingers touched, the stone simply ceased to be. It didn't crumble into dust. It disintegrated into nothingness. Flake by delicate flake. It was like watching a film run in reverse. The process of creation undone. He moved his hand slowly, carefully, tracing the outline of the weak points. It was painstaking work, requiring immense concentration. One slip, one lapse in focus. And he could bring the entire ceiling down on top of them. The cost in void energy was far less than his failed teleportation, but the mental strain was immense. With each passing moment, the hole grew larger. Dust and small pebbles began to rain down, but the main structure held. Finally, with one last, careful touch, a large section of the ceiling vanished, revealing not the sky, but another dark, dusty space above. An escape route. A path to the surface. He pulled his hand back, the dark energy receding. Hope, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, began to bloom in his chest. They weren't out yet, but they were no longer trapped. They had a way forward. Now, they just had to take it. What other dangers awaited them in the labyrinthine structure? And would Fengju's dwindling power be enough to see them through? Gasping for air, they tumbled out into the brilliant sunlight of the starter zone. Fengju felt completely drained, both mentally and in his digital essence. The hidden instance had taken a toll, leaving him utterly exhausted. He just wanted a moment, a single moment to catch his breath and process the whirlwind of events. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Their respite was brutally short-lived. Standing there, looking smug and far too pleased with themselves, were Kale and his squad. They'd clearly licked their wounds from their last encounter and, more worryingly, called for backup. Reinforcements had arrived, and they weren't just bringing more bodies to the fight. Each member of Kale's crew now brandished shimmering paper talismans, glowing with a faint, unsettling light. Feng Zhu's heart sank. He recognized them instantly. Qi disruption talismans. They were a low-level item, sure, but devastatingly effective against most cultivation arts. It was the perfect cheat counter, a tool for bullies and opportunists. Kale stepped forward, a nasty sneer twisting his lips. Well, look what the cat dragged in, he said, his voice dripping with malice. We saw you pop out of a hidden area. Must have found something nice in there, didn't you? He gestured with his chin towards the talismans his lackeys were holding. Now, be good little players and hand over all the loot. Do that, and we'll only break your legs. Feng Zhu's fists clenched. His mind raced, calculating the odds. Exhausted, outnumbered, and with his primary abilities countered, the situation looked grim. The sunlight that had felt so welcoming just moments ago now seemed to mock him, illuminating the trap he had walked straight into. Kale's thugs fanned out, their expressions a mix of greed and cruelty. Clearly enjoying the power dynamic, they were cutting off any potential escape routes. Penning him and his companion in. I said, hand it over. Kale's voice sharpened, his patience wearing thin. Don't make us get rough. Those talismans aren't just for show. One touch, and your precious cultivation will flicker out like a candle in the wind. You'll be as helpless as a level 1 newbie. He took another step, his hand reaching out, palm up, demanding their spoils. The air grew thick with tension. The sounds of the starter zone, the cheerful dings of new quests, the chatter of beginners fading into a distant hum. All that mattered was this standoff, this moment where everything could be lost. Feng Zhu exchanged a quick, desperate glance with his companion. They were cornered. A direct fight was suicide. Running was impossible. Was there a third option? Was there any clever trick, any forgotten skill or environmental advantage they could exploit? The seconds stretched into an eternity. Cal's sneer widened. Confident in his victory, he believed he had them trapped, that their fate was sealed. But he had underestimated Feng Zhu before. And that was a mistake he was about to make again. The gears in Feng Zhu's mind were turning at a furious pace, sifting through every possibility, searching for that 1 in a million chance to turn the tables. He just needed a little more time. A distraction, an opening, and he was going to create one. No matter the cost. The hunter had returned, but the prey was not yet ready to give up. The world seemed to blur and warp around Feng Zhu. His connection to the immense power he'd just wielded now severed, leaving only a hollow, aching void. He tried to summon the shadows, to call upon the devouring darkness that had served him so well, but his body wouldn't respond. It was like shouting into a vacuum. The commands were there, but the energy was gone. Every muscle screamed in protest, his limbs heavy as lead. He stumbled, his breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. He had pushed himself far beyond his limits, and now, the bill was coming due. The power that had felt so natural, so intrinsically a part of him, was now a distant memory, a cruel tease of what he once was, even if only for a few moments. Beside him, Su Ling was a whirlwind of controlled fury. Her stellar wind art, usually a torrent of unstoppable force, was now a mere flicker. The air around her shimmered, but it was weak. Disrupted. Those strange, glowing talismans the Templars had thrown down were the cause. They pulsed with a sickening, dampening energy, smothering her connection to the astral winds. It was like trying to start a fire in a rainstorm. She deflected a blow, her movement still precise, still deadly, but the power behind them was fading fast. For every enemy she pushed back, 2 more surged forward. their glowing blades a web of light closing in around her. Her usual grace was replaced by a desperate, gritty struggle. The sheer number of Templars was overwhelming. They were a relentless tide, their armor gleaming under the harsh artificial light. There was no room to breathe, no space to maneuver. Feng Zhu tried to use his spatial manipulation, to blink just a few feet away, to create a sliver of an opening, but his mind was a fog. The intricate calculations required for even the simplest spatial jump were beyond his exhausted brain. A sharp, searing pain shot up his leg as a Templar's blade found its mark, and he collapsed to one knee, a grunt of pain escaping his lips. He was completely drained. A husk of the force he had been just minutes before. He could only watch as Su Ling, despite her valiant efforts, was finally disarmed, a shimmering blade pressed against her throat. They were surrounded, a circle of cold, impassive helmets staring down at them. The pressure was immense, a physical weight pressing them down. Another Templar stepped forward, his boot connecting squarely with the back of Feng Zhu's other knee, forcing him down completely. He was now on both knees, helpless, his head bowed. Su Ling was forced down beside him, her defiance finally extinguished, replaced by a quiet, simmering rage. They were caught, cornered like animals, the grand escape plan reduced to this pathetic, humiliating end. The taste of victory he had so recently savored now turned to ash and bile in his mouth. A figure detached from the crowd, his steps slow and deliberate. It was Kale. His armor was pristine, untouched by the chaos of the battle. He moved with an air of absolute authority, the other Templars parting before him like water. He stopped directly in front of Feng Zhu, his face a mask of cold satisfaction. There was no gloating, no grand speech, just the quiet confidence of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. Feng Zhu looked up, meeting his gaze, his own eyes burning with a mixture of exhaustion and pure, unadulterated hatred. He had been so close, so tantalizingly close to freedom. Kale slowly drew his sword. The blade hummed with a low, menacing energy, its edge casting a faint blue glow on Feng Zhu's face. He didn't raise it for a grand, theatrical strike. Instead, he simply lowered the tip, pressing the cold, hard steel against the soft flesh of Feng Zhu's throat. The pressure was slight, but the message was unmistakable. It was a promise of death, delivered with casual, almost bored indifference. Feng Zhu didn't flinch, didn't even breathe. Every ounce of his being was focused on the point of contact, the icy chill spreading through his skin. You know, Kel's voice was calm, conversational, which made it all the more terrifying. It cut through the tense silence, each word a hammer blow against Feng Zhu's fragile hope. We went to a lot of trouble to bring you into this world. All that data, all those resources. It seems a shame to waste it all. He tilted his head slightly, a gesture that might have seemed curious if it weren't for the sword at Feng Zhu's neck. But you've been problematic. A glitch in the system that refuses to be patched. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, meant only for Feng Zhu. Maybe we just send you back to character creation the hard way. The words hung in the air, a cruel, mocking reference to the game-like world they inhabited. It wasn't just a threat of death, it was a threat of erasure, of being reset, of having his very existence wiped clean. All the pain, all the struggle, all the growth he had endured, would mean nothing. He would be sent back to zero, a blank slate for them to mold once more. Feng Zhu's world narrowed to the point of that blade. He was utterly, completely helpless. The memory of the power he'd wielded, the feeling of cosmic energy flowing through his veins, was now a bitter poison. He had touched the stars, only to be dragged back down and chained to the dirt. He could feel Su Ling's presence beside him, her rigid posture, her silent fury, but it was no comfort. There was no escape, no clever trick, no hidden power, no last-minute rescue. There was only the cold steel at his throat and the smug, victorious face of the man who held his life, his very existence, in his hands. The game was over, and he had lost. Thank you so much for watching this part of the story. It's getting intense, and I can't wait to see what happens next. If you're enjoying this series, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. Your support means the world to me. See you in the next video.